We have the Dallas Cowboys heading to Los Angeles to take on the Chargers as 2.5 point favorites on the road. The total is set at 51. This is Showdown coverage brought to you by SharpFootballAnalysis.com. I'm your host, Adam Wilde. And before we get into DraftKings, we want to talk to you about our promotion going on with SharpFootballAnalysis.com. So if you've been crushing it in DFS, you've got some extra winnings that you want to try out the betting world with. Go over to sharpfootballanalysis.com, use the promo code ANGLES to get 15% off your subscription. Let's jump into the slate. So you're going to have a lot of Dallas Cowboys lineups based on the fact that it's difficult to fit in all of the Los Angeles Chargers that you would want to fit in. The guys that have the guaranteed volume are there at the top: Ekeler, Herbert, and Keenan Allen. And then after that, the ancillary pieces for the Chargers are not quite as reliable as the ancillary pieces that we're going to see for the Cowboys, who are going to be at a discount because, well, they've been blown out a couple times this year and haven't produced offensively. They've had a couple good games too. It just seems like with Mike McCarthy at the helm, they haven't quite gotten it together offensively. So expect to see a lot of Dallas lineups. It helps that they're 2.5 point favorites, but it doesn't make much of a difference. I view this game as a little bit more of a pick 'em. It is a little interesting that Dallas is getting 2.5 points on the road, but that's probably because Los Angeles does not have much of a home field advantage. Actually, there's almost definitely going to be more Dallas Cowboys fans than there are Los Angeles Chargers fans. So that will um, probably make a little bit of a difference for the spread there as well. Either way, looking at the game a little bit more of a pick 'em, but it's just easier to stack the Dallas side of the ball. Both offenses are projected similar points. It looks like Chargers projected around 24 and around 26 for the Cowboys. So right there at the top, Austin Ekeler returns. He's one of the most productive backs in the league. He's gotten a lot of his work done rushing his or receiving. His snap share doesn't look super enticing, but he's still his like touch per snap is still incredible. So he's going to be getting upwards of 20 carries, and he fits really well if you want to just if you see yourself stacking a lot of Cowboys and you feel as though you're not going to be able to fit all of these Chargers and that you want to fit. Eckler's good at encompassing like the whole thing. Like, if Herbert throws him a touchdown, at least you get some of that involvement. Obviously, you're going to get a ton of involvement in the rushing game with him. So he's just a comfy way of getting like a lot of exposure to Los Angeles. Whereas if you play Herbert, who's only $400 cheaper, then you're feel obligated to stack him because while he can get some production done with his leg, he's not going to have like 7 carries for 65 yards or something like that. So feels a little bit better to have Eckler in the lineups where you're not stacking Los Angeles. That does not mean that you can't go with like a 3x3 and still remain unique on this slate. 3x3s will be super popular, but if you take Justin Herbert and you stack him with like Gerald Everett and Quentin Johnson or something like that, now you've still got a unique 3x3. You're still encompassing Herbert, but that's something that I would probably do in like a larger field tournament. Keenan Allen has been one of, if not the most productive wide receiver in the league, which is nice to see at this stage of his career. Somebody who's been a fan of him for a better portion of my adult life. A lot of people thought he was dust, and he's been leading the league. It's on the back of his massive target share, especially since Mike Williams is unfortunately out for the season, I believe. So Keenan Allen is a priority if you're going to go stacking the Chargers. So if you do go that route, it's not impossible to go the route of stacking the Chargers. It's just not as easy. Your median projection's not going to be as high, but that doesn't matter that much in Showdown anyways. If you do feel the need to go stacking the Chargers, you're going to want to stack Justin Herbert with Keenan Allen. I would start every Justin Herbert stack with Keenan Allen. It's just guaranteed volume. You feel so you get a bit of a discount going with Keenan Allen, but in a 5x1, you feel a lot better playing Austin Eckler than you do Keenan Allen because Keenan Allen is so tied to Justin Herbert. You might be able to fit a skinny stack, and we'll try it at the end of the breakdown. We'll try fitting a skinny stack with Justin Herbert and Keenan Allen and see if we can still get a viable lineup in a 4x2 with the Cowboys, but it might be difficult with that much money to stack Dak and do a skinny stack with Herbert and Allen. bringing us to Dak at 10,000. You look at that fantasy points per game, and it looks quite ugly. He has hit the 300-yard bonus this year, maybe twice. I think twice, but at least once. It's still there. They have had a productive game, maybe two productive games offensively, but Mike McCarthy was not kidding when he said he was trying to get Kellen Moore out of there because he was running up the scoreboard. Mike McCarthy is clearly not one to run up the scoreboard because he's not they're not getting there. That doesn't mean that Dak is not. I mean, we have to remember we're only coming up on a third of the way through the season. So it doesn't mean that they're not going to get it figured out, and eventually we should see the Cowboys put up a lot of points, especially since their defense has been a little bit worse with Trayvon Diggs out. Didn't think that was going to affect them too much, but it is starting to feel a little correlated. So all that to be said, the Cowboys offense is not in a great spot, but they are significantly easier to stack, especially since you're going to get $800 discount off Herbert. You're going to get a $1,200 discount off of Ekeler. Gives you a good starting foundation. Tony Pollard is going to get plenty of volume. His snap share is pretty significant, one of the higher ones in the league, something that you feel comfortable with. And 9,600 is a little cheap for Tony Pollard. Tony Pollard's the most projectable player on the Cowboys for this slate, the one you'll feel the comfiest playing, especially if you want to try to go the route of stacking the Chargers. Tony Pollard's an excellent bring back. CeeDee Lamb at 9,000 is probably that's the best value of the slate, in my opinion. Probably the best point per dollar play if you're going to look at projections, but again, something that doesn't matter too terribly much in Showdown, point per dollar. But CeeDee Lamb at 9,000 is just way too low for the for the ceiling that he provides. So maybe in cash you might not get to CeeDee Lamb, but he should be a staple in tournaments, and I would assume that his roster percentage is going to reflect that. Brings us down to Josh Palmer, who's 7,000. He's filling in for Mike Williams, so he should have a Mike Williams role. We've seen him perform admirably in the past, last year, filling in for Mike Williams at time, even filling in for Keenan Allen at times, and it's worked out pretty well. So Palmer at 7,000 is not someone you feel great about, but he is worth including in sacks with the Chargers. And I would venture to say if we cannot fit Keenan Allen in a skinny stack with Justin Herbert, we could probably fit Joshua Palmer in with Justin Herbert, and that would be perfectly fine, especially for like some large field stuff. Joshua Kelly, not super relevant at 6,400, considering Austin Ekeler will be back. He did have a decent game with Austin Ekeler earlier in the year, but that seems to be a little bit more of an anomaly because he hasn't produced too well since then, and he didn't do great in Austin Eckler's stead either. So not someone you really need to look at too terribly much at 6,400. Brandin Cooks did not get a price discount last week after having a little bit of a stinker, still 5,400. And with Gallup's new price, it's not super optimal to play Brandin Cooks because Gallup is down there at 2,800 with basically the same role as Brandin Cooks. Not a ton of reason to go with Brandin Cooks. I would rather Ferguson at that price. I would rather both kickers straight up, regardless of price, and they're both offering a discount. So not really sure how DraftKings got Brandin Cooks up to 5,400 or kept him at 5,400 rather. I think he was 5,600 last week. But regardless, he's just a little bit too expensive relative to the other options. And his roster percentage is going to be similar to the kickers. So you might as well just go with one of the kickers and I think have access to a kind of sounds crazy to say, maybe not access to a higher ceiling, but I would say more often than not, both kickers are going to outscore Brandin Cooks. I guess Brandin Cooks still could be still be capable of hitting the 100-yard bonus, but highly unlikely. Gerald Everett at 4,600 is a good option if you're gonna go stacking the Chargers. Gerald Everett's gonna be carrying a low roster percentage, so totally fine with going with Gerald Everett. I will never advise against the starting tight end in Showdown. It's kind of why I said Jake Ferguson at 5,200 is viable. He's getting more volume than Brandin Cooks too, so maybe he's not going to break off a 70-yard touchdown, take a bomb to the house, but he's probably good for 4 catches and 50, 60 yards, make you happy. Quentin Johnston is someone who we're waiting to come on a little bit, and he will pop. This is kind of how I felt about Jackson Smith and Jigba a couple slates ago. I think we covered. You're going to want to sprinkle him in every opportunity you get because there is going to be a week where he pops. He's too talented not to, first round talent. He was like the only big, like prototypical wide receiver one-esque receiver in this class, and just hasn't popped yet. He's going to be on the field a ton with Mike Williams out. He should be a 1-for-1 for Mike Williams and let Joshua Palmer split slot duties a little bit, but I don't know if that's how they're going to want to run it because the team's much more comfortable with Joshua Palmer. So they might just slot him into Mike Williams stuff because they call more Mike Williams plays. So they might put Joshua Palmer in for Mike Williams and just keep the play calling the same. That we're going to have to see how that shakes out. But Johnston is somebody that, if you're running a 20 max large field, something like that, get yourself, 20% exposure to Johnston and just know it's probably unlikely. But his roster percentage is going to be like 9% as opposed to the kickers around 20%. So that should make you feel a little bit better. Gallup down here at 28. I think this happened with the Dallas slate a couple slates ago too, where there just wasn't a lot of punt plays that you felt comfortable with, but that's okay because you had someone like a Michael Gallup that's only 2,800. Donald Parham even at 2,200 is viable. So you've got a viable cheap play on both sides of the ball that keeps you from having to go down to like your Demario Davis at 1,400 or something like that. Even Turpin at 1,600 could be fine if you're playing like the Millie or something because he's getting some design touches, but you kind of don't need to with Gallup and Donald Parham. So Gallup at 2,800, probably my favorite play of the slate. He's going to get the same opportunity as Brandin Cooks, but for significantly cheaper, and he just fits really well with Dallas lineups because if you're going to go with if you're going to heavily stack Dallas, you're going to want 4 or 5 players. I mean, you could even tell yourself that instead of going Pollard at captain, I think Pollard will be a pretty popular captain for Dallas stacks. CeeDee Lamb will probably be second most popular. Dak would be third most popular amongst Dallas players for captain. So going Dak at captain and then overly stacking him is a great option here because people are so down on the Dallas offense. So go ahead and throw Dak at captain and then throw him in there with like 3 of his receivers. Gallup makes that work really well. And then Donald Parham is just always a threat for a touchdown. He's going to be the biggest guy on the field at all times. And he's just fun to have in your lineup. So let's go ahead and build a couple lineups. The first thing I wanted to try to do was get a skinny with Justin Herbert and Keenan Allen. Probably the best way to do that is actually starting with Lamb at captain. Lamb is quite cheap. Justin Herbert, Keenan Allen, Dak Prescott. Yeah, you're going to have a tough time here. So then you throw in Gallup, of course, and see how much you have left, 2,300. You do fit Donald Parham. So if you did want to go the route of having Justin Herbert and Keenan Allen, Parham and Gallup are not like your typical punts. They actually have some projectable volume. So CeeDee Lamb at captain, Justin Herbert, Keenan Allen, Dak Prescott, Michael Gallup, Donald Parham. That's a 3x3 like we talked about at the beginning of the show that you could still get a little bit unique. Gallup's roster percentage is going to probably be around 20, but Parham's is going to be around 6. So throwing him in there is plenty viable to make your lineup unique, even though you've got 4 heavy hitters there at the top. But I think what you're more likely to do with this lineup is probably kick Keenan Allen out, throw in Joshua Palmer, and then see what you can get up to from Parham. Now you're golden. I mean, you could play Ferguson here and feel a lot better about it. So CeeDee Lamb, Justin Herbert, Joshua Palmer, Dak Prescott, Michael Gallup, Ferguson, and I believe you could even go Dak at captain for this one. Let's check that out really quickly. Dak at captain, and then in the flex, let's throw CeeDee Lamb. Yep. All right, so Dak Prescott at captain, Justin Herbert, Joshua Palmer, CeeDee Lamb, Michael Gallup, and Ferguson. I feel great about that lineup. That's a nice 4x2. You still get exposure to Justin Herbert, and you pair him with one of his receivers that's going to carry a low roster percentage. So you still save there. Ferguson's roster percentage would be pretty low. Michael Gallup will probably be sub 20. So here's a lineup with a lot of projectable volume, and you're still remaining relatively unique. Go ahead and clear that. And let's talk about a 4x. So we'll stick with 4x2s with Dallas. Of course, you can stack the Chargers and it'll be plenty viable in a game that I think is more of a pick 'em. But let's talk about going a 4x2 with a Charger in the captain spot. So Austin Ekeler at captain, Dak Prescott, Tony Pollard, CeeDee Lamb. See how much money we have left. Probably need to go Gallup here again. That only leaves 1,800, so that's a little bit too expensive. We're going to have to come off of Pollard and go with Ferguson. And with Ferguson, that leaves us 6,000. No one we feel super great about there. Probably want to go with Aubrey here, and then we can bump somebody up. What's that get us to with Ferguson? 6,400. Joshua Kelly, no, not really necessary. What about if we go? Let's start over a little bit here. Let's go Justin Herbert, or I apologize, CeeDee Lamb at captain. And then we wanted to go Herbert and Dak in the lineup. Another Tony Pollard here. Yeah, we're going to end up with a similar lineup if we do this, and then we don't have a 4x2 with the Charger at captain. It looks like it's going to be pretty difficult to get a Charger at captain and a 4x2. Even, I mean, Ekeler's who you would want. That's who I wanted to go with. If you wanted to go with a 4x2, you would go with like Ekeler and Parham or something like that. Just a one-off that can get you a second Charger in there. So yeah, you could go Ekeler, go down to Parham, and then fill the rest of the lineup with Dallas. I mean, Gallup. Parham and Gallup just make it so easy to fit who you want to play in there, but you obviously lose some of the projectable volume by doing that. Ekeler, Parham, Gallup, Prescott, Ferguson, and that leaves you a ton of money, a ridiculous amount of money. Justin Herbert, you could do Justin Herbert there. Nah, I probably want to go Tony Pollard here, and then I'll come up from Parham to like one of the kickers or something. Brandin Cooks. Yeah, I'll go Aubrey. Okay, so Austin Ekeler at captain, Aubrey, Gallup, Prescott, Ferguson, Pollard. So that's a 5x1 with Ekeler at captain. That's totally viable too, especially since Ekeler will be one of the most popular captains of the slate. But you'll see that it's a little bit tougher to get to a skinny stack with a Charger at captain unless you leave a ton of money on the table, which is totally fine to do. But obviously, if you could play Aubrey over Parham, you're going to do that. And I don't think you want to come up from Gallup here. There's not really anyone worth coming up from Gallup for unless you are going to go double kicker. And I guess you could do that in a really high scoring game, but that really limits your ceiling in tournament play. So Austin Ekeler, Brandon Aubrey, Michael Gallup, Dak Prescott, Ferguson, Pollard, leave you 600 on the table, and you still have a sub 20% probably with Aubrey, sub 20% with Gallup, and around 20%, maybe 30-35 with Ferguson to feel good about. So that's going to do it for today's Showdown coverage, brought to you by sharpfootballanalysis.com. I've been your host, Adam Wilde, and I'll catch y'all next week.